All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're going to get under the hood of our economy and figure out what actually makes it run. We're going to build a model, and it's a simple one, but trust me, it's incredibly powerful, to really understand the relationship between what we spend, what we produce, and what we all learn. Okay, let's dive in. But first, let's start with a little mystery. You've probably heard this idea before, right? That a bit of government spending or some new investment can have this huge, outsized impact on the economy. But how does it actually work? How can a single dollar of new spending somehow become $2.50 of total economic growth? It honestly sounds like a magic trick, but I promise, by the end of this, you'll know exactly how the trick is done. So, the secret. It lies in understanding that the economy isn't just a static list of numbers. It's more like a living, breathing system. It's a dynamic feedback loop where everything is connected. And the three big players in this loop are production, income, and demand. Think of it like a continuous cycle. It all starts with a change in demand. So let's say we all suddenly decide we want to buy more electric cars. Well, what happens? Car companies have to ramp up production to meet that demand. To do that, they hire more people, they pay more overtime, which means more income in people's pockets. And what do we do with extra income? We spend, at least some of it, right? And that spending creates a whole new wave of demand, and the cycle kicks off all over again. Okay, so if this entire loop kicks off with demand, the obvious question is, what exactly makes up that demand? Where does it come from? So let's break it down into its most important parts. When you look at what drives the economy, one slice of the pie is just way bigger than all the others, and that's consumption. We're talking about you and me buying goods and services. It is by far the biggest driver of the U.S. economy, which makes it the most important piece for us to understand first. Now, for our model, we're going to keep things simple and focus on what's called a closed economy. That just means we're going to set exports and imports aside for a moment. So that leaves us with three core drivers of demand. First up is consumption, which we call C. That's all the stuff we buy. Second is investment, I. Think of businesses buying new machines or putting up new buildings. And third, there's government spending, G. Everything the government purchases. You add them all up, C plus I plus G, and you get the total demand for goods in the economy. Now, I know, this looks a little technical, like some scary math formula, but the idea behind it is actually really intuitive. It's just a simple way to model a very basic human behavior. How much do we spend based on the money we have left after we pay our taxes? Economists have a name for that leftover money. They call it our disposable income. And this function really boils down to two key parts. The first one is C0. You can think of this as your baseline spending, what you'd have to spend to survive even if you lost your job tomorrow, by dipping into savings. It really reflects your basic needs and, just as important, your overall confidence in the future. The second part, C1, well, that's the real star of the show. It's called the propensity to consume. And all that means is it's the fraction of each extra dollar you earn that you decide to go out and spend. So, are you a spender or a saver? That little number, C1, holds the answer. Okay, so we've got our feedback loop and we've broken down what drives demand. Now we get to put these pieces together and find the economy's natural balance point. This is a huge concept called equilibrium, and it's the point where the amount of stuff being produced perfectly matches the amount of stuff people want to buy. So in economics, we call this point equilibrium. Production, which we'll label Y, is exactly equal to demand, which we'll call Z. It's the sweet spot. Factories aren't piling up unsold goods, and shelves in stores aren't empty. Everything is just in balance. Now, to see how the economy actually finds this sweet spot, we've got to connect a couple of ideas on a graph. First things first, we need a ground rule. In the economy as a whole, total production and total income are really just two sides of the same coin. Think about it. Every dollar of value that gets created or produced has to end up in someone's pocket as income. So we can draw a line and say production always equals income. Okay, next up is demand. So as our income goes up, we tend to spend more, right? So demand increases. But, and this is key, most of us don't spend every single extra dollar we get. We save some of it. And that means that while demand goes up with income, it doesn't go up quite as steeply. And why is that? It's because of our old friend C1, the propensity to consume, which is almost always less than 1. So what you have are these two forces, and the economy is always trying to find the one point where they meet. It settles at the level where the amount of stuff being made is exactly equal to the amount of stuff people want to buy. And that point right there where the two lines cross, that is our equilibrium output. That is the economy's balance point. So now that we've built this whole model and found its balance point, We can finally unleash its true power. This is the aha moment. It is time to solve the mystery we started with. Let's run a little experiment. Let's say the government decides to spend an extra $1 billion building new bridges. Now, that's a direct, one-time injection of $1 billion of demand into the economy. But here's the fascinating part. The economy's total output is going to increase by way more than that initial billion. So why? Why does that happen? It's that feedback loop we talked about. That first $1 billion in government spending immediately becomes $1 billion of income for the construction companies and all their workers. Then they take that new income and, depending on their propensity to consume, they go out and spend a chunk of it. That spending becomes brand new income for people at the grocery store, at the car dealership, and so on. And then those people spend a chunk of their new income, and this ripple just keeps spreading through the economy, with each new round getting a little smaller than the last. And this whole incredible ripple effect can be captured in one simple, beautiful formula, the multiplier. It's just 1 divided by, in parentheses, 1 minus C1. What this shows us is that the total impact, the total magnification of any new spending all comes down to that one single variable, the propensity to consume. If C1 is higher, it means people spend more of any extra cash they get, which creates bigger ripples and a much larger multiplier. And with that, we can finally solve our mystery. If we assume that C1, the propensity to consume, is 0.6, meaning on average, people spend 60 cents of every extra dollar they earn, then the multiplier is 1 divided by 1 minus 0.6, which equals 2.5. So that initial $1 billion in government spending gets multiplied, and it creates a grand total of $2.5 billion in new economic output. See? It's not magic. It's just macroeconomics. Now, look, this model is an incredibly useful tool for understanding the mechanics of the economy. But before we get too carried away thinking we've solved everything, it is really important to add a dose of reality. We need to talk about how the messy, complicated real world can be a bit different from our clean, perfect model. I mean, just think back to the 2008 financial crisis. When Lehman Brothers went bankrupt, fear just ripped through the country. People started getting really worried about another Great Depression. And even though their incomes hadn't dropped yet, their confidence, that C0 variable, it plummeted. They started hoarding cash and saving more out of pure fear, and that slammed the brakes on consumption, sending this massive shockwave through the economy that just overwhelmed the normal mechanics. And this leads to a really interesting, kind of counterintuitive idea called the paradox of saving. You know, we're all taught that saving money is good, it's a virtue, and for any one of us individually, it is. But if everybody in the entire economy decides to save more, all at the exact same time, especially during a downturn, well, that cuts down on overall consumption. That leads to lower demand, which leads to lower production, and can actually push the economy into a recession. The truly ironic part is that in the end, the total amount of saving in the economy might not even increase at all. So does all this mean that the government can just act like a surgeon, perfectly fine-tuning the economy with little tweaks to spending and taxes? Well, our model might make it look that easy, but reality is way more complicated. For one, actually passing new government policies is slow and really difficult, and the effects aren't always predictable. People's expectations about the future, things happening in other countries, all of these can change the final outcome. And that's not even mentioning the fact that aggressive policies can lead to some really big budget deficits and public debt down the line. So the next time you see a headline about a new government spending bill or a report on consumer confidence, you'll know what's going on behind the scenes. You'll understand that hidden engine at work, the power of the multiplier, and that constant feedback loop driving our economy. If there's one thing to take away from all this, it's that in a system that is this interconnected, you have to remember that even a seemingly small change can end up creating some very, very big ripples.